Welcome back to the channel. We have a couch repair to feature today, and I would like to take the opportunity to discuss how to estimate a repair on a couch or anything, really, because we a lot of times get the question, like we did just yesterday on another video, what do you charge? So we really want to take a look this time, use this as an opportunity to discuss how we can go about estimating a repair, and then we'll keep track of our time and see how we're doing. Now, first of all, though, I'd like to thank Gary Babinek for his video, the last one we just posted, where he did a case study on the peel and stick urethane. Now, we may have already had an idea about whether that's something we want to use or how effective that kind of a thing is, right? But having the idea is not the proof, right? So if we're going to apply a scientific method to this, then we need a case study. We need an experiment. And thank you, Gary, for doing those two experiments for us. Now, the experiments themselves may substantiate what we already knew, but it might also give us new ideas, maybe new questions. Do you have any new ideas or any new questions that have sprung from Gary's experiment right there? Well, I do. And you may want to stay tuned to this channel in the future because we're going to enjoy some more experimentation. Now, a while back, I did a 3-part series on some furniture repairs that no one would ever dare touch. And the conclusion of those in that 3-part was that there is a whole new market available for those that want to develop the hand stitching techniques. Now, we often get asked, is there a new income stream that I can look for to add into my services? And so this is it. But it means that we want to develop all of these skills, become proficient, become the master of these skills, because then we're going to be the only person in our area that can do these repairs. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. Because for each and every repair that I get, including the couch today that we're going to feature, is the customer is called around and they find no one who can do what they need. The answer is absolutely not. But then when they call me, the answer is, sure, I can do that, no problem. And they're like, what? Did you just say? Sure. So it's that big of a difference. And for us that develop these skills, that's what we're discovering. We're the only one out there that can do them. And so we take on jobs that no one else will dare. But for each subsequent job we take on, we run across new ideas out of necessity often, but new questions too. And these new ideas and these questions cause us to grow in our unique marketplace that we've carved out for ourselves. Now, if there was a trade magazine that would feature new business opportunities, this would be a great one. But no one seems to be interested in that. But it's available to you, and that's why we like this channel so much, because you and I have a chance to see on this channel this kind of a new business opportunity. So let's get a closer look at our couch today, and let's take a look at how we might estimate this job. Now, in these pictures sent to me by the customer, it's apparent that we have a couch that would have been very expensive. This is leather throughout, everywhere. So right away we can think it merits repairing. The damages are pretty extensive, and I have seen what I thought initially 3 large seams to be hand-stitched. But it's hard to tell from the pictures exactly what's going to be involved. Now, in the series that we mentioned earlier, Part 2 featured a panel that was sewn in entirely using hand stitching methods. So from that experience, we learned how long a seam we can stitch per session and how long that session is. For example, if we found that we could stitch 22 inches per session, and that seam took us 30 minutes to accomplish, now we have a basis for estimating this job. So I'm looking at these pictures, and I'm thinking a half hour per stitch, but look how inaccessible that seam line is going to be. What's the level of difficulty per stitch in the recesses of that couch? So instead of a half hour, I'm figuring 1 hour for each of these 3 large seam lines. So you could figure then your hourly rate, right? What is your shop hourly rate? Just multiply that by 3. That's your estimate. Okay. Other factors might come into play if you were going to have to transport the unit. Okay, but in this case, the customer was going to have someone transport that to the shop, so that was out of the question on this one. I wouldn't be doing it on location because I explained to the customer I can't do it all at one shot. I have to do it in a succession of sessions over the course of days. I'll probably need the couch for a week, right? So there's no travel to the customer location, there's no trip charge, and there's no delivery charge of anything because the customer's bringing it. Okay. The explanation for the customer is that the session can only be so long, not just for the fingers on hand stitching, but for the back, because you're not free to move this couch around so much while you're working on it. You have to work where it is, bent over, cramped and twisted, and you can't do that for much longer than a half hour without causing injury to yourself. So that's the other explanation for the customer. Well, we have 3 hours estimated to the customer, and they've agreed, and they've sent it, and it's arrived. Well, this is my first hands-on with the couch. Obviously, there's been a 3-dog night on this couch, but no joy to the world as a result of it. The damage is different than I thought, but it's going to be easier than I thought at the same time. There is an extra seam, so now there's 4, so I misestimated that. This is the packet of Dacron that fills the lumbar cushion, and here's a pillowcase of all the leftover Dacron they pulled off the floor, no doubt. And here I'm taking notice of this center seam and seeing if maybe I could line that up with this other center seam to get things started. It became obvious that to really work on this, I would need the couch lying on its back. So you might take note of that as another reason why we really couldn't do this in the residence. My goal here is to initially gather all of this material that was separated and see if I can line it up with that center seam we pointed out. A lot of this is going to be individual square knots, just to hold together one stitch at a time. My goal is just to gather the best I can to line things up on that center seam. What I want to do, and what most of you request, is to show you the entire couch repair. We won't be able to do it in real time, so we'll speed through a lot of the parts once we establish what we're doing. And of course, I'm able to calculate by the timestamp on the video all of the time that the camera is actually on. so we'll know how much time was invested. There will be some time spent not recorded. For example, gathering together the tools that we need and gathering the vinyl that we're going to be using later. But those are incidental things and don't take up much more than a few minutes each. At this point, it's a great relief to put all this trash together and have it all line up. And that cleans up the area so we have better direction for our next large seams. Gathering all the trash, 16 minutes. For the left seat cushion, we see that this connective fabric is all torn and it's so threadbare. So it's not holding anything. We have to replace that connective fabric. And there's a piece of wood here to staple into. Let's use that. Even though it wasn't anchored there originally, that gives us some direction as far as where we can anchor this cushion. Going over to the right seat cushion, we have an idea of what's required, and we could measure. So we need about 4 inches of material, but let's go 5. That way we have a 1/2 inch for seam allowance on either side. While we're at it, let's measure the length of the next seam. So now with our width and the length, we can cut some material. It's amazing how such small scraps of material can come in handy for something like this. This is actually a bit of a urethane fabric that I had left over. I want to clean up the leather here because I want to attach a piece of basting tape on here. So all this loose stuff has to be gotten out of the way. Now the basting tape I have is a two-sided clear tape. And what I do here is stretch it when I pull it apart so that the paper starts to come loose of the clear. And if you've had it for several summers, you understand how the paper may not want to come off all the time. We're not going to stitch through this basting tape. We're going to leave that for the seam allowance. If the paper sticks too much, just leave it. It's not that critical if it is in there in a little short spot. So the idea is to put the new piece of material face to face against the original leather just like you would do if you were running it through a sewing machine. And that basting tape holds everything together so that you can stitch it. And you can see the objective here, still having a 1/2 inch left over so that we can staple it to the wood. I want to roughly mark where our seam allowance is. I can feel it. Then I'm going to measure out every 1/2 inch. Our stitch is not going to be pretty. We're going to do something that's just going to expedite the job here. It's not going to be pretty. It'll be functional. It won't be visible, but it will get us done in good time. And I'm going to use what I call the simplified saddle stitch. Here I run the thread all the way through on the end and even up both sides. Then travel a 1/2 inch on one side, and then come with the needle from the other side through the same hole. Now this one will travel the next 1/2 inch. And the bottom thread comes up to complete the cycle. Now there's a reason I call this the simplified saddle stitch. It's done the same way as the saddle stitch, but of course, the saddle stitch is designed to be seen. It's a work of art, and the people that do it are truly artists. So if we were to call this the saddle stitch, we would be offending these artists. There's no doubt about it. So I like to say that I employ the method of the saddle stitch in a very simplified form. Let's give them the respect that's due for their artistic work. The saddle stitch is designed to be seen. It's on the top side of the leather, and the needle penetrates from the top side. But as you can see here, we are penetrating from the underside of the leather, and therefore our stitch is not going to be seen. Notice we also measured every 1/2 inch. That's too rough. That's too long a distance for a nice seam. We're also not stitching along a well-defined horizontal line here. So we're purposely avoiding all of those artistic attributes of a true saddle stitch. We have a considerable distance to travel, and we want to expedite the job as fast as possible, hence the 1/2 inch stitch. Also, there's going to be nothing fancy on the end like you would do with a true saddle stitch. When we get to the end, we're just going to tie a square knot, and that's it. There you go. Now it's time to staple that down to our wood bracing. You can see how this works much better with the couch laid on its back. Also, I wanted to note that we're not going to trust just this one line of staples. I'm going to come across the top of this at the very end with a little bit more support. That'll be at the very end of the video. So the stitching of this panel was actually quite easy and quite accessible. We wouldn't have had to stitch down in here as deep as where we're stapling. So that's why I say this job ended up actually being easier than I had imagined. Not much to this fabric, but let's put a few staples. So everything involving that left seat cushion took 35 minutes, 20 minutes of which was the actual hand stitching with the simplified saddle stitch. So for the left lumbar cushion, we have the exact same thing as the cushion we just did. So what this teaches us is that any time that we need to extend a panel, we can extend it using the simplified saddle stitch. What if we had to extend a panel and the seam was going to be visible? For example, we wanted to cut away a piece right down the middle of a cushion and add half a cushion to it. Well, in that case, couldn't we simply measure everything more exacting? And if we went every quarter inch instead of every half inch, we'd have a much tighter seam in the end. Still, the ending seam on the top side would look like a blind stitch, just like it appears in the seat cushion that we just finished. The beauty of this application, though, is that none of our seam is going to be seen at all, meaning we can really make some time. This particular stitching is easy on the fingers. You could actually do this all day. Since the dogs had a lot of fun chewing up this container for the Dacron, I'm using a baseball stitch here just to give it some symmetry. I can stuff all the leftover Dacron in there now. And I'm using it all up. Everything that came in the pillowcase is in there. And then why not just use the pillowcase to hold everything together? stuff all that garbage back in there. Not so easily accessible now, but we can still depress the cushion and anchor to the wood. So the reinforcement we're going to add later will cover both of these strips. There is leather split out here on the end, and this will require its own attention. But for now, this lumbar cushion has taken us a total of 35 minutes, 25 of which we're doing this simplified saddle stitch. Now for the end seam, we are using just a square knot at a time to get things hooked together. And from then we can start with a double needle blind stitch and just create a new seam where the leather has been split apart. Pretty simple to do, but nonetheless it does take time beyond the major stitching that we did. So I'm glad I beefed up the estimate to where I did. So this seam is connecting the lumbar cushion to the left-facing armrest. Remember, we designate the furniture parts by the position where they are when we're facing the furniture. So that arm is a left arm facing in furniture language. Whereas in automotive, it's always from the driver's perspective. Okay, so that end seam then has taken us a total of 15 minutes, all of which was stitching. Double needle blind stitch. Now for the middle seat cushion. Same thing. It's attached about halfway over, so we don't have to do the entire length of that seam. So I cut another short piece to go in there. I'm marking it with pen this time to give you a better view. Again, calling this the simplified saddle stitch, going all the way through on the first one and evening up both ends to the same length. So we have a needle on either end at this point. Calling it the simplified saddle stitch so we don't offend those who make great artwork out of this technique. Now the bottom comes up in the same hole, shares that hole with the thread that we just made there. Just snug it up as you go. I think that was a little better view on that stitching than we had the first time. Speaking of a better view, sometimes I get comments on the videos, we can't see what you're doing, you're in the way. Yeah, well, that's the way it is in real business. I have to see it too, and then I'm in the way, of course. That's real repairs on real paying jobs, and we don't have a camera crew. Just a square knot is all I need on the end. If it bunches up the material on the end, I'm not concerned about that. That's why it's the simplified version. And that's actually not a bad looking seam for the simplified version. Okay, so that's the sum total of the middle seat cushion, 24 minutes involved, 16 of which was stitching. Now it's time to connect the left seat cushion facing to the middle seat cushion, and this just gets our double needle blind stitch. Now typically here we would talk about using the chisel point needles for leather, meaning that they're going to cut new holes. We're not using existing holes. We're gathering it up a little bit. But here I'm actually using the round tip needles, and very successfully. Why is that? Because with proper technique, you find that you can often use the round tip needles on leather. It's all about how you hold it, how you follow through, which we've talked about at length on this channel already. Some people talk about using a thimble or using pliers or something like that. So these individuals don't understand the proper technique. Maybe they've just done it one time and trying to show you what they do to compensate. But actually, with the proper technique, you would be surprised how often you can just use a round tip needle like this that you would use for cloth on leather, and it goes right through, because that is where your energy is concentrated properly. I think I used pliers one time to get a needle through on some really dried BMW leather where you had about 4 layers of leather to get through to pull a corner together. And I think on that one I ended up having to drill a hole anyway because that BMW leather gets like cardboard. But that's like one time in 40 years. And this is all coming together really nicely. Down here where you can barely see it. There is one more separation I'm going to show you here. I'm just going to use a couple of individual square knots to pull that together. So the double needle blind stitch to connect those two cushions took us 20 minutes. The promised work is done. There are some other things I'd like to do. There is a small repair, and there is this missing color here where the dogs took the color completely off. I want to touch that up before I let it leave my shop. This repair gets the baseball stitch, of course, and a simple repair over that, as we've shown many times on this channel. I didn't take much time on the coloring. I cleaned it like a wild man because that's when you get it done more efficiently anyway. Rubbed some color in. I didn't spend any time with the quality of the damaged finish, just added color and clear. So now it's fit to go. I feel good about delivering it by throwing in a little bit of extra work. Here's the double needle blind stitch, putting the two panels together. We've taken a job that no one was willing to do and made it a simple job, all because we have confidence in our skill set. This cardboard tack strip is not the soft kind that you usually use, and it's not used here in its intended purpose, by the way. We showed this on the arm of a couch where this cardboard allowed us to pull the vinyl back over top of it, and it leaves a nice straight edge. But this is a very rigid, especially rigid cardboard, and I can put several extra staples along here, and that's going to give some stress relief to where all of these cushions are anchored down here on this piece of wood. So I waited to do this step when I had somebody help me to depress these cushions so I could get in there better. And when I estimated the job, I didn't figure paying A.R.T anything, so too bad. This is the picture that the customer got, telling her that it was ready to go. And here's our analysis. The total time for the work that was promised is 2 hours and 25 minutes. So we could say we did very well on our estimate for this job. So I'm happy that I got paid well. And I know not everyone is going to do this, but I could throw in an extra repair and color. That added value is so routine to me anyway. What ends up happening is the customer is so elated that they spread the word, and you will get more work by word of mouth. Well, I hope you enjoyed that analysis. Thanks for hanging in there and watching the whole video. We'll see you next time.